Yeah.
There he is. We're just checking in. We're going to start shortly.
Yep, I've been here.
Okay, we're going to start shortly.
Hi, it's Kyle, too.
Meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. I also would like to ask a question to everybody. Does anybody here object to have photos taken? Just let us know. Thank you, Mr. Vieira.
Okay, we're going to have our commission member, Jerry Boyd, as our acting chairperson for the meeting.
I'd like to call the meeting to order, and I'd like to start by having the commission members who are here and board members who are here to introduce themselves.
Good evening, I'm Felicia Battles Birdsong.
Good evening, Ducera Bosca from Boston.
Hi, Zari Amir Hosseini, Boston.
And as the commissioner said, I'm Jerry Boyd, also from Boston, from West Roxbury, and we have a couple of folks on the phone.
This is Kyle Robidoux on the board. Hello, this is Eugene Gloss from Hyde Park.
Great.
Thank you all, and I am Kristen McCosh, the Disability Commissioner for the City of Boston. Before we get to the agenda, I would just like to invite, we have an elected official with us this evening, Councillor Ed Flynn, if he'd like to come up and say a few words and just introduce himself to the community. The councillor was just elected in November and sworn in on January 1st. Welcome, Councillor Flynn. Could you speak at the mic? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to the board members for giving me the opportunity, for inviting me here. Just want to introduce myself. My name is Ed Flynn. I'm the new City Councilor, District 2, which includes South Boston, the South End, Chinatown, downtown Boston. And I just want to come by and say thank you for the great work that the Commission is doing across the city, making sure that Boston is accessible to everybody, those with disabilities. And that's a top issue of mine on the City Council. I'm retired from the U.S. Navy. I served 25 years, and I'm also active with the DAV, which is the Disabled American Veterans. And so I'm proud to be here with you today. And if there's anything I can do to be helpful to anyone in this room or across the city on these issues, feel free to give me a call. Again, just want to say thank you for the opportunity to stop by to say hello.
I think this is going to be a great contact for us moving forward because Councilor Flynn he's supported me throughout the years, even before he was elected. So I know the board is interested in getting more involved in City Council. So we can work with Councilor Flynn moving forward if there are issues that we want to raise for hearings or anything else we want to bring to a citywide level. We'll certainly work with your office on that.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you to the board members, and thank you to Mayor Walsh for having an inclusive administration and in a group. And whatever we can do to be helpful, please let us know.
I just want to give one shout out too that Ed is the son of our former mayor, Ray Flynn, for those of you who don't know. So, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next, the first thing on the agenda, besides the introduction, is the approval of the December minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Great, the minutes pass. And next on the agenda is a presentation on the 115 Winthrop Square project by Kathleen McNeil of Millennium Partners.
Thank you very much, Commission members. The project has recently filed its draft environmental impact report.
Kathleen, can I ask you to speak at the mic?
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. The project recently filed its draft environmental impact report, which is the 2 volumes that I placed on the desk. Tonight, we'd like to give you the highlights of the project, and then I'm assuming that there will be follow-up meetings with staff, because as you can see from the 2 volumes, there's a lot of material, and I'm not going to get into every bit of that this evening. But I would like to provide an overview and then welcome any questions. So the project is located in Winthrop Square, which is bordered by Federal Street and Devonshire Street, right in the financial district. It is the site of a city-owned parking garage, which we are in the process currently of demolishing. The aerial view at this end of the table shows you what the site looks like currently. The project, as conceived, will be 664 feet tall, measured by the City of Boston zoning code. You may have read in the paper things of 700 feet tall. 700 means sea level, which is a number that the FAA uses. So this building basically conforms now to the FAA requirements and to the new state legislature shadow laws that were enacted last summer as part of this project. The project consists of several uses. Starting at the ground floor, there's a great hall, restaurant, some retail kiosk. Then there's 750,000 square feet of office space, which is approximately 20 floors. Then above that is approximately 500 residential units. The project will strive to be a model as far as LEED and other energy conservation and resiliency measures. The project, because it's part of a city-owned site, will generate revenue to the City of Boston, not only in the form of our purchase of the site, which currently is $152 million, and then it's also triggered additional money based on the number of residential units that get sold. The project will also provide for 115 affordable housing units. We just submitted a proposal to the city for parcel 12, which is another city-owned parcel in Chinatown, in order to complete the units of affordable housing, which we are proposing to do off-site. The benefit, if you look at that project on parcel 12, is that it will allow us to leverage the units that are required by the Winthrop Square into approximately 170 units. So by putting them off-site, we're actually able to create more affordable housing units. In addition to the affordable housing, the site will provide jobs training linkage money as well as housing linkage money. It will contribute $250,000 to a downtown planning study so that folks can go back and look at downtown and figure what's the correct uses that downtown wants to have. It will improve the Winthrop Square Park, which is in front of the site. Later on, we'll show you some existing conditions of what that plaza looks like today, and it really could use some help. It will also improve the pedestrian environment in this area. I'm going to turn the project over to our architects, Libby Fowley from Handel. She's here with her colleague, Steve Makovitz, as well as our collaborating architect, Troy DePisa from Dream.
Evening. So our project from Federal Street has a much taller presence, and then just to get a sense of the massing, and this is the view from Devonshire along Winthrop Square. So as we go into sort of what the pedestrian feel is, it'll have a much more intimate entry from Devonshire and Winthrop Square and a less sort of defined path, but everything will be worked out as Shauna from Ground will describe into a accessible grading pattern. You'll enter into the hallway, the Great Hall from either Federal Street or Devonshire. And there is a 5.5-foot grade change. So, I guess it slides later. So just to generally understand the mass of the building, the Great Hall as well as both lobbies will be the lobbies are both accessed from Devonshire for both the office component as well as the residential. And as I said before, the Great Hall will be accessed from either side. It'll be a through block nature. And then directly above that will be 19 stories of office. And then finally, the top of the tower is where all of the residential units will be.
Is the Great Hall public space?
The Great Hall will be public space, and I will talk about some of those uses in a minute. So this is currently how we're working through the Great Hall. The larger space, as we see here, is the portion that's closer to Federal. There's a more intimate, higher elevation entrance that we're calling the portal right now that's accessed from Devonshire. And because of the substantial grade change, the top of the hall and the bottom of the hall are accessed via a passenger elevator that's directly along the path that I can show you in a minute. So right now the idea is that all of this is open to the public on a day-to-day basis, fully accessible and programmed so that it's always an enlivened space. The boxes that you see floating are a variety of spaces. Part of that is meant to be a portion of a food establishment that would be operated and available to the public. And then the higher boxes are meant to be rentable or by either the office above or at times by the public, and also meant to be activated so that you're seeing things sort of happening across levels, and that the space, even when it's not having special programs, is sort of a nice place to be. So in addition to the day-to-day, our hope and goal is that this will also be the kind of space that could hold a State of the City meeting, indoor movies, and other public events that are available for all Bostonians to use.
Does it have fixed seating?
It will not have fixed seating, but we are calling it something like a scaffolding. So the idea is that there would be a series of predetermined program types that Millennium, and Kathy, feel free to step in, that Millennium would be prepared to. So for example, if there was a fashion show, the scaffolding would already exist to sort of help facilitate those kinds of uses, but the day-to-day will have non-fixed seating, and there will be times when all of that is sort of moved to storage so that it's just a general hall for, say, a State of the City use or a TED Talk or something like that, as well as more traditional seating that's sort of, as we have here, and those would be different and supplemental to sort of the everyday moving furniture that's someplace that you might want to go work. Okay. So that is to be continually developed as we get further down the road, but that's where we stand now, and I think that's how we'll continue. So
in the interest of time, could we just talk about the accessible elements?
Yes. Great. So here you can see that this is the sort of substantial grade change that happens. And as I said, it's 5.5 feet. That's just the current grade between the two sides of the site. And this is the current wheelchair path. So to the north of the screen, you see the passenger elevator that would be dedicated just to getting from the top portion of the hall to the lower portion. And the elevators that are along the south would be access to get to those boxes and any public program elements that were further north or further up in the building.
That's one elevator?
There's one elevator that's just for getting from the Devonshire elevation to the Federal Street elevation, and then there are two additional elevators that are accessed from the lower Great Hall that are used to get to the mezzanine and level 2, which also have public amenities.
I just have one quick question. It was for Kathleen, actually. You mentioned that first of all, how many floors are there before you get to the actual residential units? 26 floors and then residential?
Yes.
Wow. And you mentioned that the offsite, which is at Chinatown, you're looking to have some more accessible, affordable apartments there. How many are going to be in the site now?
There's no affordable housing units on site.
Okay.
All of the affordable housing is off site.
Off-site.
But there are going to be accessible units in the.
Yes.
Will be accessible.
As part of both projects.
Right.
The building code
Will be accessible, and then the affordable
can
will
we
be different.
can we go through the presentation first and then do questions at the end, just so we can have everybody at the mic?
Sure.
So I'll hand it over to Shauna.
Hello, I'm Shauna Gillis-Smith from Ground Landscape Architecture. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the intentions for Winthrop Square itself and the current conditions. So the current conditions, as you can see a little bit on the slide, are that the square itself has a brick paver that has just been loosely set, and some very substantial trees that are causing some heaving within the brick, as well as the trees themselves are maybe like 30 inches above the streetscape, which also means that if we are to keep the trees, one would need to keep the grading, the current elevation of the trees, and I'll get to that in a minute. So one of the conditions when we're looking at the square is that it is currently a non-compliant condition. There's some non-compliant cross slopes on the square itself right now. So what we're looking at, and I'll go through this very quickly, is we want to understand the square in two different ways. One as a pedestrian crossroad, and the other as a destination in itself. And by pedestrian, we're also, meaning pedestrian in the larger, the larger sense, where pedestrians of many modes and different abilities. But with the addition of the Great Hall, we want to make the connections through the financial district and downtown crossing easier and more fluid. So you will be able to come from the T down Winthrop Lane, through Winthrop Square, and the weather protection of the Great Hall getting out towards South Station or Post Office Square, for example. So while the idea is both to make this facilitate pedestrian movement through it, we also want the square itself to become a destination place. The proportions of the square with the surrounding buildings is more like a European plaza. And when we're thinking of it, we want to make it feel more pedestrian than vehicular. So we're discussing the potential of table-topping one side of the square between the Great Hall and the square. Table-topping meaning bringing the grade level of the roadway up to the level of the pedestrians, and using bollards to and other means to define the difference between the vehicular and the pedestrian way. We're also looking at this in a larger context of ways to enhance the green livability of the downtown area, including the work Millennium has already done in Shoppers Park and Tontine Crescent. And then the character of what we're imagining for the square is really one that is more of a passive outdoor space. Sitting, and we do understand that there will be fixed seating, and we'll have fixed seating that also does have backs, provide places for chair users as well. So we really do understand well, it's not even understand. We really do have the desire for this to be a place that is welcoming and comfortable to all. And then the last two things that I wanted to talk about, the one I've already mentioned, that well, we have done an assessment on the health of the tree, both and the trees are healthy. Their long-term prognosis, they probably have about 15 years after this project is built, and they do have quite significant grading implications to the overall square. So we need to really assess the design with the context of keeping in mind is keeping the trees in, and if they have to be kept in exactly their current configuration if we're keeping them alive, is that really the best strategy to create a square that is open to all and used by all for the next 100 years? And I'll pass the slide back to, oh, actually, did you want to say anything about the statue?
I'll just say very quickly, transportation to this site is very available from South Station, MBTA, bus lines. So that's an exciting piece to this. And should there be vehicles, this is the pathway for vehicles. Office users will use Federal Street, and residential users will use Devonshire Street, as you can see in this outline. Someone had asked a question about an accessible unit. We will be designing all of the units to meet, don't quote me, there's one group in the building code, so that all of the kitchens, you can get access around them, and then there'll be a certain percentage of units that are built for accessibility.
But all the affordable housing will be built in Chinatown?
All of the affordable housing right now is proposed for Chinatown. We have not been awarded that site. We put in an RFP for it.
What's the
Otherwise-
time frame for that?
I heard we were the only bidders, so I'm hoping that the city will process it quickly, but that's a rumor, so. I know I'm on TV, but I could be getting in trouble.
So our office will work with the team moving forward to make sure that the materials on the sidewalk are accessible and acceptable for the city. And I wanted to know if the board members had any questions.
I asked all mine.
Any other questions?
Yes, for me, a question. My name is Ducia again. So I was looking at this picture that you have of, it looks kind of fancy. It's the page, it looks like a mall here.
Great Hall.
Yes, the Great Hall. So I'm curious, so I don't know if it was you or your colleague or from the architectural department was talking about it, but you mentioned about there's going to be affordable units, and you were talking about elevators. But I'm looking at the Great Hall, and I'm just curious, it looks like, are there also going to be stores in that building, like CVS or anything like that?
Honestly, we hope not. There will be retail, but the idea is the lower portion of the hall that you see on this section, which is accessible from Federal Street, will want to have certainly food, coffee for the neighborhood and for the office users. But the idea is that it's able to be pushed aside so that you can have these civic events. We're designing the hall to fit up to about 350 people. The idea is there will be a different, it'll be run like a nonprofit organization. Some of the events we will charge for, depending on who the user is, with the idea that the money that's collected for those events would offset those users who are nonprofits who might want to use the space for something. So, for example, Madison Park High School might want to have their graduation here because they can't fit 350 families anywhere else. That would be great. And what we want to do is we want the space to be usable for people that are not immediately downtown, but for people that are in Hyde Park, people that are in Roxbury, people that are in Jamaica Plain, so that they can benefit from this project as well, so that not everything is happening downtown.
All right, then my only last question is just a follow-up. So whoever lives there, they will be able to use the public transportation nearby to go grocery shopping, right? I'm just making sure.
Well, the Roach Brothers is right up the street.
Okay.
And the good news is a lot of these, I think you saw the slide where the dimensions of the sidewalk were laid out.
Yes.
We are increasing the dimensions of the sidewalk quite a bit. Kristen has already trained me that we use concrete, none of this fancy stuff, although she usually lets me have a little strip somewhere. But the end result of that is a lot of the downtown sidewalks are going to become much more accessible so that you can get around. And yes, it's very accessible by public transportation.
Thank you.
The phone had some.
Yeah, do we have any questions on the phone?
No questions.
Any questions from the audience? If you could use the mic.
Patricia, could you help her with the mic?
Hello. Hello, my name is Elizabeth Dienklauer. I had 2 questions, just clarification. Did you say all the kitchens would be accessible? Did I understand that correctly?
There are certain dimensional requirements that all of the kitchens need to follow.
Yeah, ultimately they need to be we're required through Fair Housing Act to make sure that all the kitchens themselves can be convertible. So, and with a minimum amount of effort. So if there's a tenant that comes in that needs a converted kitchen, it can be done by the staff relatively quickly.
What they call non-structural renovations. Yep.
And just one other clarification, for which, will the accessible units then be throughout the full residential, all the stories, just thinking of things like medical evacuation, fire, emergency evacuation? I'm just interested to know.
Yes, the units are distributed equally throughout the building, and also divided between 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, so that you have accessible units for all of the unit types. They could be on many different floors. The building will be fully accessible as far as all of the public areas, and there will be life safety systems.
I just have a weird quick question. I'm just thinking about the safety that she just brought up. That you're talking the 26th floor where the residents will start, which is kind of high up. So
The elevators go 1,250 feet per minute. They're very fast.
So in the event that something happens, the elevators are, is there a generator? How do you?
Yeah, there is a emergency generator, and the elevators are always on those generators. Typically what happens is the elevators will drop to a floor, the firefighters come in, use a firefighter elevator, and then they will go get anybody who has a disability. Our buildings are staffed 24/7 with security and concierge. Typically, our staff keeps a list of anyone who needs assistance. That could be permanent assistant, that could be temporary. If you were sick for, a month or something, you would record your name so that should something happen, people know that you're on
Is
that.
your staff right on site?
Our staff is on site.
And just to clarify as well, these are going to be at the main facility. They're going to be market rate apartments, correct?
Correct.
So rental, not sale?
They're for sale, not rental.
Okay.
For
They're
sale.
all for sale.
They're all for sale.
Okay.
That's both sides, the,
I'm not sure if a decision's been made on the affordable units.
okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And next we'll have Christina Poff. Forgive me if I'm pronouncing your last name incorrectly. To tell us about the Community Preservation Act.
Thank you so much for having me. I didn't bring slides, I should have. But I really wanted to come tonight because I'm the new Community Preservation Director for Boston, and you may know about the Community Preservation Act. I'll describe it a little. But I've been going around the city and in City Hall talking to different commissions and committees and neighborhood groups about CPA and what it means for all the many different kinds of stakeholders that might be interested in this new pot of money. And if you don't know, CPA is $20 million a year for a new fund for Boston that is raised through a surcharge on people's property taxes or commercial property taxes. And it's been the money has to be spent in 3 areas. It's originally a state law, and the city passed it by ballot question last year. And it's to provide funds for affordable housing, parks and open space, and historic preservation. And one of the main features that I learned pretty early on when I started last fall in talking to some of the other cities and towns that have a CPA is that they've used it to do accessibility improvements in all of those 3 areas. And so it feels important to make sure that I connect with all of you and that any projects we're thinking about, making sure there's accessibility, and that there will be some special accessibility projects that we fund with CPA money. I've already been approached by several historic properties that would like to meet ADA requirements and don't currently, and they need to do it in a specific way that it meets historical requirements also. I've been approached by the Richards family that's building Martin's Park on the waterfront by the Children's Museum, and really trying to incorporate a lot of accessibility features. And then I've talked to, I think she's one of your members, I was hoping I would see her tonight, Olivia Richard, a lot about affordable housing and how we can make sure that we're increasing affordable housing that is accessible. So that's sort of the basics, but I'd love to, and we really hope that in the first year or two that we're touching every neighborhood with these funds, that we're doing projects in every neighborhood, and that that every project has some accessibility features and really meets the expectations that all of you have, and I think that the city has for accessibility. And so I just opened I'm hoping that maybe you'll have some questions, or if the piece that, first let me answer any questions, but then there's a specific piece about how we might work together on projects so that I can talk about. But first, if there are any questions about the program and how it's rolling out.
Hi, I'm Felicia, Battles Birdsong.
Thanks.
So you're in City of Boston, and so
I am.
you said you're looking to work with all the communities around Boston.
Yes.
And have you started with some of the disability groups that are in smaller neighborhoods, some of the NPOs and GROs around the communities?
I have not, and I would love to do that. I've been, I've been to neighborhood associations, civic groups. I'm starting to do some public forums. I've met with a lot of people in the building, like city councilors and others who are stakeholders. But if the commission can maybe share a list, a lot of it is me reaching out. I've had a few people contact me or ask me to come to their meetings, but a lot of it has been my initiating. And I'd love a list of groups that to work with. That'd be great. Yeah, really, I'd be thrilled to do that. Okay. And especially in the neighborhoods where people are thinking about projects. I want to make sure that we're connecting the right people together. For instance, there are 3 historic facilities in what's called Monument Square in Jamaica Plain. There's the Loring Greeno House, there's the Footlight Club, and the Elliott School. And the Elliott School is like the first school in Boston. The Footlight Club is the first community theater in Boston, and the Loring Greeno House is a really old house. And I met with them because I think the committee that will make decisions about spending this money, if they all 3 come in with a proposal, which one do you do? And so I got them to sit and talk together, and we went over some options, and I got them to actually think about maybe going in together on a proposal for the ADA accessibility features. And if they all did it together, then it's a real tourist and Boston site for people with disabilities to actually visit a whole neighborhood or a whole area that's accessible, which I just felt like it made sense. So that's just one, and so I would love to make sure that I connect with groups in the JP Roxbury, Rosendale, West Roxbury area that would potentially access those resources.
Our agencies in Jamaica Plain, that's when you said it, I'm thinking of the task force and our Independent Living Center and a few other things that might be worthwhile.
Yeah, I'd love that. Good. Any other questions that any of you have? So I think what would be helpful, if I can ask all of you for things too, is to figure out if you have ideas, like someone who I thought was on your commission, but I don't see his name, and it's David, and he lives in Hyde Park, and I've had conversations with him about the accessibility on the Boston Public Library.
That would be me. He's in the audience.
Thank you, sir. Hi, David. Great. One of the first conversations I had about CPA was with you. And so it immediately put accessibility issues in my mind. And it's enabled me to talk about them in many settings. But so I met with the Boston Public Library, and they had a temporary ramp when their front was being constructed, and they're putting sort of that temporary ramp back. It sounds, because you and I have communicated. And it's right. That's what when I met with them, they said it's not there right now, and they want to apply for a permanent structure. But I would like to, like, if we get if we get proposals for ADA projects, I would like to make sure that I'm running them by the commission. And then if we get proposals where it looks like there should be an ADA feature, but there isn't, I'd like to run that by the commission. And I'd also love to know, at some point here, maybe I can come back in a few months as things are a little more evolved. If there's, or we could have a discussion about what your priorities are. If there are priority areas of the city, or types of facilities, parks, or just how we should shape this and how decisions should be made. And I'm trying to collect as much feedback and information as I can so I can give it to the decision-making group is a commission like yours that is called the Community Preservation Committee, and they're partly by state statute, they're from certain commissions like Parks and the Boston Landmarks and Conservation and the Housing Authority and the BPDA. And then 4 of them are at-large committee members that the City Council has chosen. And they need, if we get 150 proposals twice a year, they're going to need some help vetting them and understanding, and I'm going to want to give them feedback from different stakeholders and committees. So I'm here as much to ask all of you for help also. And then the last thing is, if there, and I think your Commissioner Makash and I can help figure that out, like how to do that process together.
Yeah, we can work together moving forward and bring the issues to the commission, and we can sort of be a liaison between the two groups.
Great, that'd be wonderful, yeah. And I have set up community advisory groups for each of the 3 areas, and if any of you and who are connected to the commission would like to participate, we can totally make that happen in helping to review proposals. But the last thing is, like, if any of you have ideas for proposals, I'm trying to figure out how to connect individuals or small groups who may not be part of that's my phone. I'm so sorry. I sort of tried to turn it down and it didn't turn down. But how to connect small groups or individuals or residents with like a CDC that could be the actual fiscal agent and actually do have the developer, the builder, or the designer actually implement a project.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, we'll wrap it up there, but
Sure.
just to say that we'll certainly work closely together moving forward.
Great.
I know you're just getting started. You
Yeah.
kind of hit the ground running, and it's great that you had an early conversation with David so that accessibility is forefront in your mind.
It is,
And I'm
yeah.
sure, like fully said earlier, that to meet with the small groups in the neighborhood
love
is
that.
going to be very important to make
That-
sure that people who aren't heard, that their voices are also
Great.
included in the conversation.
Good.
And like I said, we'll continue to move forward.
Thank you, and thanks so much for some time to talk about this tonight.
Great, thank you. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the project? Does anyone on the board have any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, moving forward, we'll hear an MBTA transit update from Dana Nye.
Ms. Knight had to unfortunately cancel for tonight due to a medical emergency.
okay.
I'm sorry.
All right, no problem. And then the next thing on the agenda was the chair's report. I didn't hear of any updates. Anything to share? No? Okay, and then the next thing is the commissioner's report.
Thank you, Jerry. My report isn't too long, just a few updates I wanted to tell people about. So first of all, as I'm sure you all remember, we got a lot of snow a few weeks ago, up to almost 2 feet in some areas of Boston. And the city requires sidewalks to be shoveled within 3 hours of the end of the snowstorm. And property owners are required to shovel a path that is 42 inches wide down to the sidewalk. And property owners who live on a corner are also required to shovel the curb cut. So unfortunately, we got a lot of complaints that curb ramps were blocked after the storm. And the city does not shovel sidewalks, as most people may or may not know. The city concentrates on plowing the streets. So we try to work with property owners to get the word out that they're required to shovel curb cuts. But one thing that was started this year, just very, recently, and it hasn't really got off the ground yet, but the mayor's SPARK program, SPARK, works with people who are millennial age, and they're trying to recruit volunteers to shovel out curb cuts.
What is it called, Spark?
SPARK, Boston, yes. So, like I said, it just kind of organized as a result of that snowstorm. And we have some hope for it, though, because one of the things that is difficult for the city is to get volunteers to shovel out people's houses, like steps and sidewalks, because we don't want to match people with residents, because it could be some, some vulnerable residents who are elderly and disabled. So we are very cautious about doing that. But curb ramps aren't attached to any people. They're just like in the neighborhoods. So look for this out on social media. It's going to be moving forward. And we hope to get some volunteers organized to get it out there for the rest of the winter. Although I'm hopeful that we won't get any more snow. So that's my plan for the winter.
That's wishful thinking, I think.
Kristen, I just have a quick question about
Yes.
that. So with the snow, one thing that I realized for myself was that I called to see if there were organizations or volunteer areas that would do residential shoveling or help people with disabilities or elderly. We have a few elderly people in our unit. And I couldn't find anything. Do you know of any resources that are available?
Well, interestingly enough, because you live in South Boston, one organization called the Labouré Center in South Boston, they started a program this year called Snow Angels. I know it was directed mainly towards people who are elderly, and I don't know how it's run. I don't know how the success is, but you could look into that if that may be helpful. Other than that, like I said, the city is sort of hesitant to match people individually with elderly people and people with disabilities, just, to be on the safe side. What we tell people is our office can help find the property owner if it's a large corporation, or if it's BHA, we can try to get you to the right person. Other than that, unfortunately, it is the property owner's responsibility. So if it's a private residence, then even if you have a disability, you're required to either, if you can't shovel it, to hire somebody, or just to look for volunteers that you may be able to find.
What about AmeriCorps and ABCD? I know that for the main streets, Hyde Square main streets, they have an AmeriCorps person there that's working with businesses to help out with that very same issue around shoveling for some folks. So what about an all-out, would that be worth?
Yeah, if this is something the board would like to take on, that would be a great project, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, yeah. The city, like I said, we concentrate on the streets, which is a job in and of itself, so we can't, unfortunately, do the sidewalks, but...
What is the best way, Commissioner, for someone who feels like either they live in a building and he feels like their property hasn't been shoveled properly, or should they call 311? Or
311 will direct the call to the Public Works Department, and they go out and issue tickets to property owners. That's not their first objective, is to find people. They really want to help get the sidewalks shoveled. So if you can't work with your landlord directly, you can call 311.
And these resources will be shared with 311, so in case a person calls, they'll be able to direct them
we
to
do work with 311 all the time.
Okay.
Okay, so then just a few other updates. We're having some more work done in City Hall. The parking offices on the second floor where people pay tickets, we're going to have one of those counters lowered. Right now they're built in concrete, and they're very high, so people in wheeled mobility devices can't reach the counters. So that's in addition to the recent upgrade of City Hall council chambers and the bathroom work that happened over the last few years. Another thing that we're working on is a meeting with the taxi owners who own Wave cabs, the wheelchair accessible vehicles. We're meeting with the owners this week to also have them learn about options that will potentially increase their business and offer more opportunities for people with disabilities to get rides by partnering with Uber and also potentially the MBTA's ride program. Right now, Uber has 11 vehicles that have wheelchair access, but they're trying to get as many of the 100 Wave vehicles into their fleet as possible. And then also, the Ride has a pilot program that allows people with disabilities, instead of taking a ride van or sedan, they can call a Wave taxi. So we're going to meet with the owners to let them know about these two options, and we hope that will increase people with disabilities options for getting accessible transportation. And on that note, I'm also working with the Metro Planning Organization of Boston to set up a roundtable discussion on transportation options for people with disabilities. I'm going to be setting that up in the late spring, so I'll invite the board members and people from the community to attend, just to make sure our voices get heard in the larger discussions across the state about accessibility and transportation.
And this is the MBTA as well?
The MBTA will be included, but the MPO is the regional planning organization that works on transit infrastructure across the state and especially in the greater Boston region. So they work with the T along with every other transit organization.
Okay, I just was thinking about the snow that you mentioned. I know that a lot of people had 2 to 3.5 hour delays waiting for the ride. They had a lot of call-outs, and I was thinking, why don't they have, a secondary contingency for?
That's exactly what this meeting will be about, like ideas like that. They want to hear our ideas and also our barriers that we deal with.
I'd like to be.
Yes, yep. And that's all my updates. If anyone has any questions, I am available. Board members.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I just have a quick question regarding what you just mentioned. I keep forgetting the name of that, the Uber that does, Uber that does the, connects with the MBT, with the ride. What's the program? Yes, what's it called?
It's a pilot program.
It's a pilot program.
Okay, so it's being used, right?
It's in process, yes.
And what's the name of what's the name of it exactly? Like if I
you would have to be a ride. You'd have to already be signed up for the ride or sign up for the ride.
Okay.
And if you're a ride member, then you can use Uber in this pilot program instead of taking a ride vehicle.
Right. There's a very simple application, and they hook you up with one of the vendors, either Uber or Lyft.
Yes.
Is it the same cost that it would be for the ride?
It's less, actually.
Yeah, it's a
$2.
$2 copayment as opposed to $3.
Okay, so if I have someone who is using the ride, I can just let them know just to call the ride, just check in with them to see.
Right. I'm not sure whether they're still accepting people, but they may be. So.
Yep, you can check in with the ride about that.
Okay.
Kristen, I have a question about Uber. You said there are 11 accessible. Do you use the same grading system as you use with
They're all completely ADA compliant.
Gotcha.
They're brand new minivans with the ramp that folds out, so they're all A's. Yes.
Great.
In the rear, from what I've noticed, they're all rear accessible. And just from my personal use, I think it has improved over the past few months. It's been a little bit easier for folks to access them. So.
And of the city wave cabs right now, there are about 50 that are completely ADA compliant.
Nice.
Questions on the phone?
Commissioner?
Yes.
Hi, it's Eugene. So I just want to let people know in general, if there's anyone that needs just some assistance outside of, the meeting with the ride and anything like that, you can definitely direct them my way.
Okay, we will do that. Thank you, Eugene. Any questions from the audience?
I think David has a question.
Good evening. My name is David Vieira. I'm from Hyde Park. I want to clarify something about that ride discussion. And if there's somebody here that will back me up on that, the Uber and Lyft deal is you pay $2. The ride pays, I believe, $11 or $12 of your trip.
I think it's 13.
13. If your trip is over that amount, you pay.
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, it's not like the ride will take you from point A to point B for the same $3.15. There is an additional charge.
It's quite a large radius, though, that goes to $2.
That's fine. I just wanted to clarify because of the question that was brought up.
Yeah, definitely. That's
Commissioner,
a good point.
to you, my question is, have you been able to find out anything from the email I sent you last week regarding the removal, once again, of the temporary ramp at the Boston Public Library?
I haven't found out anything about that, but we did get word earlier this week that neither the library or my office were awarded ADA municipal grants from the state. So we had put in a proposal to do some work in City Hall, and the library had put in a proposal to put up the temporary ramp for 3 to 5 years while they look into creating a permanent ramp. So that doesn't mean that they're not going to do it, just that they didn't get this particular funding to make that happen. So we were disappointed, but the library is committed to putting the temporary ramp in place. So I will work on getting in touch with them. I did follow up with them, but it was late.
Explain that to me. Why was
Okay.
the ramp removed? I'm not following that.
Yeah, I'm sorry if that was a little complicated. I don't know why it was removed this time, and I reached out, but it wasn't until, I didn't have a chance to reach out until today. So I wasn't able to get a hold of anybody, but I will follow up this week and see if I can find out. In addition to that, the library had applied for a grant to get some funding to do the ramp, and they didn't get that grant, but they're still planning to put some funds in their budget moving forward to do the ramp. So I would say that it will be back up there. I just have to find out when.
It's just a mystery to me that the ramp keeps coming and going and coming and going. If this is an issue of rental fees.
No,
for the
it's
ramp-
not. It's not. It's not funding. I don't know exactly what it is, but I will find out this week and get back to you.
Very good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other
Meanwhile, people still cannot get into that entrance.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes, Elizabeth Dean Clower. Just returning to the discussion about the Ride Pilot Program. That literally is what it's called, the MBTA Ride Pilot Program.
Right.
Actually, they, as an incentive, I think, to have more people using it, and a recognition of the expense, they actually have upped that for an interim time, that after the client pays the first $2, the ride was paying up to the next 40, and then it reverts back to you.
Very good.
However, in places at times of high traffic, or the quote prime hours, rush hour, that it's possible to exceed that $40 limit by another $20 or more dollars without it being a significantly different distance or time. So that's a caveat there. And as the commission and I were discussing, and I have discussed with the Cambridge Commission where I used to serve, that it's really concerning for people who are wheelchair users that this is intended as same-day on-demand paratransit transportation. And what will be very helpful with the inclusion of wave taxis is that those 11 vehicles are, since it's at the driver discretion of when they're on the road, if they're on the road, they're often, as a practical matter, it's often not possible to get same-day service. And in fact, the drivers and both Lyft and but particularly Uber will advise that if you have a meeting or a medical appointment, something that you know of in advance, don't rely on that.
That's why we're hoping to get more vehicles in these pools.
Yeah, it would make a huge difference because the scarcity. So at my request, wheelchair users are allowed to sign up for both Lyft and Uber, but the problem is they haven't done any PR about that even though they implemented that in the summer, many people still don't know that if they signed up with Uber, they also can sign up with Lyft.
So I'll be meeting with the officials from the T and Uber this week,
that
and I will find out the latest updates, and we'll send an email out to the commission.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all those updates. Any other questions on any other issues?
And I believe another speaker is present. Is that correct? Maggie. Okay, Maggie, would you like to come up?
I apologize, but I have to leave.
Thank you, Zari.
Good evening.
I'm I'm Maggie Austin. I'm here from the Institute for Human-Centered Design, and I'm here to talk a little bit about our user expert lab. I thought I sent along slides, so I apologize. They don't seem, I didn't bring my own. I thought they would be here already.
What's the name of your agency again?
I'm sorry?
What's the name of your agency again?
The Institute for Human-Centered Design, IHCD. And hold on one second. I have some flyers and information. That would be great.
I apologize about the slides. Our staff person who usually organizes this had to leave early today, so
that's
we
okay.
are maybe a little bit out of order.
I'll just have to entertain you all with my voice, and there'll be no visuals, and it'll just be what it is. I'm Maggie Austin. I'm the coordinator of the User Expert Lab and Public Programming at IHCD, the Institute for Human-Centered Design. I've been there just over a year now. I got involved with them as a user expert first. I have low vision, considered legally blind. I was born with optic nerve hypoplasia. And before I talk to groups of people, especially other people who identify as having disabilities, I like to remind the crowd that I was born 2 months after the ADA was passed. So for me, I have the incredible privilege of not knowing a world without the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so a lot of my experience and context comes from being a millennial. So that said, I'll just really quickly tell you guys a little bit about IHCD, the Institute, and what we're all about. I'll give you a little bit of an overview of the User Expert Lab, and then talk about a couple of our upcoming projects, which is what I'm really excited about and hoping that I can get more people interested and involved in. So IHCD is going to be 40 years old. We are a Boston-based nonprofit organization dedicated to enhancing the experiences of people of all ages and abilities through excellence in design. IHCD believes two things very strongly. We believe that design has the power to influence our confidence, comfort, and control, our own little 3 C's. And we also believe that variation in ability is ordinary, not special, and that variation in ability happens to all of us at some point in our lives. IHCD sort of has 4 arms. We do a lot of consulting and design services where we work on contracts around the physical buildings and architecture to technologies and products and websites, and we provide services for that. We do training and technical assistance, especially through our project. We're one of the federal ADA sites, so we are the New England ADA Center. We also do a lot of education and training. We run workshops and host internships and fellowships and students. And what I'm really here to talk to you about today is our research component, which is our design research lab, our user expert lab. And we do that work through the lived experiences of people who are aging or have disabilities, and in what we call contextual inquiry framework. Today, we believe that we are lucky because we live in a time where people live longer and survive more illness and injury than any other time in history. And that reality means that we have to redesign or design a world that makes that work for everybody. And so places, things, and technology are designed by people and are things that are designs that can limit or disable people. Since people are the ones that create environments like places and things and technology, then that means people have the opportunity to be more inclusive and to make everyone welcome in those environments. So, sort of a cyclical thing. So just quickly about our user expert lab. Our user experts we define as in two ways. We have primary user experts and secondary user experts. Primary user experts are people such as myself who have lived with a functional limitation and can share based on their authentic lived experience about how a design or an environment is working or not working for them. A secondary user expert is a person who has spent significant amount of time with a primary user expert and is observant about their experiences and the way they're interacting with their environment. So a parent, a teacher, a PCA, different things like that. And I'm just going to skip some things since you're not looking at the PowerPoint that I'm looking at. And one of my favorite quotes that sort of encapsulates our user expert lab is from a user expert who I haven't had the privilege to meet yet, but he said that he would never assume to know what it is like to be a person with full sight. So why would you assume to know what I need as a blind man? And I think that's a really powerful illustration of why we do the user expert work we do. So our user expert lab works with anybody from municipalities to companies to other nonprofit organizations, universities and schools. We do a lot of work on websites, and we start every review, every user expert opportunity by making sure we have a really awesome set of diverse user experts in the room. And so really what I'm here today is to give folks enough information so that if you or your friends or coworkers would be interested in being user experts, to really diversify our pool of user experts. It's really important to us that when we do a user expert review that there is a diverse range of abilities and ethnicities and backgrounds and cultures and languages at the table, because we really believe that if something is designed well for people on the edges of the spectrum, then it is going to work well for everybody. And the only way we know if something is working well for the people at the edges of the spectrum is if they're involved in the design process. And so that's really what the User Expert Lab does. It brings people, regardless of ability or age or culture, around the table to experience design and give us feedback on it.
Maggie, can I ask, so the User Expert Lab, is that something that you would work with developers that we work with? Would we send them to you, or you would come in to work with them?
Yeah, absolutely. For example, the 115 Winthrop Square folks, they would probably, like the stage they're at now isn't probably a good example for user experts to interact with, because probably many of our user experts, we really try to do it in the context. So it would more be like, oh, we'll take a group of user experts to Winthrop Square as it is now, right. And the developers can then get that data of how people are interacting with and experiencing the square now. Okay. And then once they do something different with the square, we could bring a group back and say, oh, this is what's working now. Oh, maybe you could tweak this a little bit.
Oh, that's great. I'm really glad to know about
it.
This
is great.
option.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and I'm sure we would love to do that. We don't get that opportunity a lot to work with the developers in that way.
Well, you will now. I can promise you that.
Yay!
Yes, I am. Are you looking for user experts and the secondary experts at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody who wants to get involved, we would absolutely love to have you. We often put a priority on primary user experts being involved in the process, and so secondary user experts aren't always our first call. But sometimes, especially if there's a population like sort of missing from our research, we'll pull in secondary user experts who can speak to that because they have seen the experience.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So just to provide some clarity, and that sort of answered your question. So our user expert reviews are not really intended to be moments of advocacy. You don't need to have any training on ADA laws or regulations, but they're really just about you sharing what you're experiencing authentically. And we work really hard to create space where that feels safe, where you can provide your feedback and in as authentic as a way as possible. And I always tell everybody, well, if you didn't feel comfortable saying it then, you can always email me later. So that's really important to us. Our reviews happen in what we call in situ, so in a context or a situation that's real. So we try not to create any simulations or mock-ups. We really want people to be interacting with products or technology or an environment that's real, because we think that's where we get the best information. All of our reviews are documented. It's really important to us that we collect the experiences and information so that we can inform best practices and design in the future. And so we take pictures, video, we take a lot of notes. Sometimes we use GoPros these days. Really interesting ways that we get to document the experience. So if you sign up, it kind of feels like you are now a member of the elite and you're being followed around by the paparazzi. It's a little funny.
So Maggie, can I ask a question? It's Jerry Boyd from the commission. So how often do your user labs meet? And can you give it like an example of of something that you would meet about?
Sure.
Or meet on?
Yeah. Our lab, so we conduct what we call user expert reviews. And they're typically by appointment, so we'll get asked to conduct reviews about an environment or a product or a technology or whatever it is. And then we make appointments with user experts to come review that environment. And it's usually one-on-one. Sometimes it's in small groups, as many as 4 user experts and a couple IHCD staff. And the times range and vary. We do a lot more when the weather is nicer.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, we're out there much more in the spring and summer and fall. We do some in-house reviews in the winter, and the timing really varies. And our reviews, regardless of what we're reviewing, really focus on what the World Health Organization defines as our contextual environment. So we're looking at the physical environment, the communication environment, the information environment, the social or attitudinal environment, and the policy environment. So we try really hard to make it about a holistic experience, not just one element of that. And that's, again, why it's really important to bring a group of people to the table. Some of the reviews, and so this is great question because it rolls into what I really want to talk about, which is our upcoming reviews. We have 3 big projects that we're currently working on with our user expert lab. One is with the Mass Cultural Council and their UP initiative, their Innovation and Learning Network. The second is with the MBTA and their new design guide for access. And the third is with the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation and their Universal Access Program. And so with MCC, the Mass Cultural Council, and the UP program, we visit different cultural nonprofits across Massachusetts, and there are 11 organizations in the Innovation and Learning Network this spring, and so we'll be visiting a lot of those in February and March. So we're all hoping there won't be too much snow in February. And so we're looking for user experts to participate in those reviews. And we did about 10 cultural organizations last spring. And we went to Mass MoCA out in where's Massamoka? In North Adams?
North
I
Adams,
think?
yeah.
So we drove the 3 hours to North Adams, and we hung out at Massamoka all day, and really we broke off into 2 groups, and we had 2 user experts that a group of researchers followed around and really documented their experience in the museum, and another 2 who sort of went a different direction. And at the end of their visit, a couple hours of meandering around the museum and just talking about what they're experiencing and how they're interacting with the museum, we all sat down, had some lunch, and talked about those experiences. And it gave the museum an opportunity to ask questions, and it gave the user experts an opportunity to be a part of the brainstorming for the solutions to the barriers that they were experiencing. And that's my favorite part of my job. Like, it's, drummers call it being in the pocket. That's like my pocket, when the people who are experiencing a barrier or a challenge get to be a part of the conversations that alleviate that barrier. And ultimately, we hope that universal and inclusive design practices create a world where there just aren't barriers. But for now, these opportunities really allow us to see where they are and how to change them. So I talked about UP. I gave you the Massamoka example. There's 11 new organizations this year. Most of them are a little closer. Really exciting group. I'm excited. A lot of theaters, so get to see a lot of performances this year. And I'm really looking forward to the dialogue that comes from that. The second project I mentioned, which everybody gets really excited about, is the design guide for access for the MBTA, the Massachusetts Bay Transit Authority. We've been working on a lot of projects with the MBTA recently. We helped with a review of the Green Line and the commuter rail, specifically reviewing their inaccessible stations. And, well, they're really inaccessible when they say they're inaccessible. But they're, other than the physical barriers that those stations created, there was a lot of communication and information barriers. And so it was great to bring user experts out there and see what they were experiencing and the confusion, and then be able to present that to the MBTA and as they consider renovating and remodeling those spaces. The design guide for access is a project where there is a book of guidelines and standards that the MBTA is supposed to be following that to meet accessibility every time they bring on a contractor. And that document hasn't been updated since 1990. And IHCD, at the time, Adaptive Environments, was the organization that created that document. So
I actually remember that document.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny enough, even though our office created it, we only have a couple of hard copies laying around. Like, it's pretty crazy. I don't remember that document except for the copies laying around our office. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. We're working in partnership with other design organizations to put together a really awesome guide that the MBTA will be able to add to every RFP that they put out for contractors. And they'll have, hopefully have not only the standards, which is sort of the base of the pyramid, but they'll have, the guide will also provide them best practices and then universal design principles. And we're really hoping to develop those best practices and principles from bringing user experts onto the T and seeing what works and what doesn't work for them now. And we think that'll really help us create some of those recommendations for the guide, is seeing how people are using the T today. And we're really concerned with things like lighting and signage and wayfinding. And so as many people as are interested in participating from as many walks of life here in the city and on the outskirts, we'd really love folks to be involved with that.
Yeah, we can get that out on social media.
That'd be great.
And if the board members can bring that back to their communities. I apologize for not having slides, but we will email all the materials to the board tomorrow so you can share it with your groups.
I just have a quick question. I wanted to go back a little bit. You talked a little bit about training, education, internships, and workshops. I heard you mention something about that. Can you expound a little bit more on that? What the workshops look like, maybe?
Sure.
Where they're going? Who's doing them?
Yeah. So that's not exactly our user expert lab work, although sometimes I do go out and help with trainings and stuff. Our Valerie Fletcher, our executive director, does a lot of public speaking and education engagements where she runs workshops that she tailors for the needs of the audience. We partner a lot with Suffolk University and their design school, so we go into their classrooms, help with design critiques, or do preliminary universal design or inclusive design presentations with them. I've been in a couple of colleges and universities. We went to UMass Dartmouth and did presentations for their design students. It ranges depending on, you know, if you ask, we will usually come.
Okay.
Is there a fee to the developers or the?
We are a nonprofit organization, so we, you know, an honorarium is great, and we evaluate speaking engagements on a case-by-case basis otherwise. So.
Was there a third?
Yeah.
I just want to wrap it up.
The third one is it's winter, so we're not out at parks right now, but is our partnership with the department, the Massachusetts Department of Conservation and Recreation. This past summer, we were at Salisbury Beach and up north, and we went to the Esplanade. We took a trip down to the Blue Hills, and so we're really hoping to bring user experts into state parks and gather information about what they're experiencing in the park in order to inform improvements on the access at the park. So a lot of signage and wayfinding challenges that are relatively easy fixes if they know what the challenge is and how to make it better. So we'll be doing more parks as the weather gets nicer. I'm not sure what's next on our list of parks we're going to, but we're super excited about really bringing users out there and seeing how they experience the parks in our state. So.
Great.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the board?
Nope.
On the phone? We do have a question from the audience. So, David, could you use the mic, David?
No, I'm not going to get up. Where
are you
located?
IHCD is located at 200 Portland Street, right in the west end across from TD Garden, near the intersection of Causeway Street. So yeah, that's 200 Portland Street. And just so folks know, I could read out the URL that gives you more information about our User Expert Lab program, but it is on the flyers that Winston passed around for me. But for folks who are listening over the phone or on TV or radio, the URL is www.humancentereddesign.org. And if you want to sign up to be a part of the User Expert Lab, after the .com, the .org is a /UE form.
And David, we can email you the materials if that would be helpful.
That would be very helpful.
Okay, we'll do that tomorrow. Yep.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good information.
And next is Patricia Mendez with an architectural access update.
Thank you, Maggie, for your wonderful presentation. Thank you for all the work you do. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Patricia Mendez. I'm the Architectural Access Specialist. I have a quick update. I serve at the Architectural Access Board, and I have good news regarding the rewrite of the code, the 521 CMR. It's going to go into the phase of the public meetings, and when I have the schedule for public meetings and public comments, I will share it with the board, probably be on our next meeting. Second is Commission on Disabilities Alliance. We get together by phone every month and we talk about our municipalities and we collaborate.
And that's a group of Greater Boston Disability Commissions, is that correct?
Correct.
What is it called, the Alliance?
Yeah,
The
CODA?
new name, it used to be MACOD, but now this year it's CODA, C-O-D-E, Commission on Disabilities Alliance.
And it's, can you name some of the towns that are involved?
Cambridge, Somerville, Medford,
Revere just joined.
Brookline, Newton,
Yep.
Great.
It's well attended.
It's a great resource.
So this month, we shared the accessibility survey that our Boston Commission has been working on. So we shared with them, and they're helping us responding. And the other item that I want to share with you about this group is that we are planning a training on how to review variance applications. And this is a training that we are going to host, and we're going to get the help of the Architectural Access Board Executive Director, Tom Hopkins. But we're going to hold it here in City Hall in the month of May. And our audience is going to be commissions from the other municipalities around Boston.
Access variances, you say?
Yes, the subject is how to review variance applications.
And you'll all be welcome to participate as well.
I'm very excited about that.
Great.
Another couple of projects that I want to share is 160 Federal Street common lobby upgrades. The developers came and asked us for some feedback on an upcoming project in Federal Street, the same street that of your project. They're going to upgrade the ground level common lobby, and they asked for accessibility feedback.
Is that the one that's going to be the food hall?
Yes.
It's going to be an open space to the public called a food hall. And I was just in New York City this past weekend, and I saw 2 different food halls. So I think it might be something,
What's that?
It's basically, it's like a food court, but it's much more elegant, kind of maybe trendy. It's not McDonald's and things like that. It's a little bit higher scale.
Something trending now.
Yeah.
I think they have one in Chicago as well.
Okay, yep.
And the other project that we were asked for feedback and we were involved is the development of Parcel 9 at the Blackstone Street Haymarket. And we had a very productive conversation about the sidewalk improvements, the curb cuts, the pedestrian crossing as it affects the Haymarket Association. We're also working with the BPDA in a collaboration regarding Highland Park RFP, request for proposal, on the language regarding a proposed pedestrian connection with a high portion of one of the streets, a pedestrian connection to the lower portion.
Highland Park in Roxbury?
Yes. And that's it for me. I'll be happy to take questions.
Great. Any questions from the board?
Nope.
Any questions on the phone?
Is anyone on the phone?
Eugene? Any questions from the audience? We'll get back to board members about the training date, and we'd encourage people to attend if at all possible. It'll be a very interesting training and helpful for your work on the board to be able to read variance applications and weigh in on them.
Right.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia, very much. And next item on the agenda is old business. I wasn't at the last meeting, so I don't know if there was any
I don't think we had any.
business. No old business? No old action items, then I would assume?
Nope.
Any new business? No? And anyone from the public would like to ask a question or comment on anything that we've discussed?
Please come up to the mic.
Hi, I wanted to introduce myself and the work that I do. My name is Elise Patterson, and I am the director of Abilities Dance. We're a dance company that welcomes adult dancers of all physical and mental abilities. We're a Boston-based group. We have our rehearsals in Lyric Stage and also my private home studio in Brookline. And we have been in existence for the past year or so. We have, since our first show in February, performed not only our own shows, but different showcases in the Boston area and beyond, most notably the Boston Contemporary Dance Festival, and also the series at the Alvin Ailey Theater in New York. Now, as we're growing into an incorporated nonprofit, we are looking for board members and also new dancers of all abilities. And I really try to work with people and just bring different types of people who have different abilities to make really great dance pieces. As far as participating, there is no cost to participate, other than like things like transportation to rehearsal or performance venues, and we also work with composers to create music, so it's a truly collaborative piece. Yeah.
Do you work with VSA at all?
Yes. Actually, the managing director, Nicole, is the chair of the board.
Oh, great.
And where are you located?
We are between a couple different rental studios, the Lyric Stage, which is an accessible space on Clarendon Street, and also my home studio in Brookline.
And when's the event in February?
Oh, we have a fundraiser event in February, but our next show is actually not until June, so we're trying to get new dancers and new board members so we can kind of really pitch 2018 as our strongest year yet.
So this is arts therapy, basically, dance therapy.
Yeah, well, it's therapeutic for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So we can get your information and send it out to the board, and also
Yeah,
put it on social
I
media.
love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would greatly appreciate it. You can find out more about us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Abilities Dance Boston. You can also email us abilitiesdanceboston@gmail.com for information of fundraiser, joining, or just learning more about what we do.
Where's the event in June?
It will be at the Hibernian Hall in Roxbury.
Great.
And is this part of a national initiative, or is it just your own?
It's just
you started
my
it in
own.
Boston?
I wanted to have a dance place where I could perform and have people like me, people not like me, create new pieces of work.
It's at Hibernian Hall, you said?
Mm-hmm.
In June. I'm just hoping that area, they're doing a lot of construction around that area, so I'm hoping all that's finished by then, because
I hope so too.
accessibility is going to be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Congratulations! That sounds like an
Yeah.
exciting project, and we're
Thank
really
you.
happy
See
that
you
you
soon.
came to speak with the
Thank
board.
you.
That's
I
great.
hope to see you guys at events.
Any questions?
I'm sorry, tell us your name again.
Elise Patterson.
We'll get you all her contact info.
Okay.
And we can also, like I said, we'll get it out on social media to help you
Thank you.
promote it. Yep.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Oh, one more gentleman.
Sure.
Somebody on the phone.
Hello. So my name's Ethan Linsky. I'm the youth program specialist of EPIC, which stands for Empowering People for Inclusive Communities. So the sole purpose of me being here today is to extend our outreach and just to teach and expose what we do in our signature program, which we call Service Warriors. Service Warriors are it's a competitive program for young people with disabilities to apply to commit to 1 year of service, where they will be engaging in monthly service projects that is coupled with leadership development programming. So, for instance, in February we're going to be serving at community servings, creating and making a meal, and we believe that our young people that work, not ours, but young people that work with us and engage in EPIC learn valuable skills through Service Warriors and serving their communities, while also being able to engage with the relative and needed skills in order to be active community members in their communities in the beginning to pursue their goals. We are accepting applications up until the 31st of January this year. So luckily,
What's the age group?
Thank you. 16 to 23.
And they are people with disabilities?
Yes. Around the greater Boston area. There is, although we're very flexible with fee, there is usually a $200 one-time fee in order to pay for clothing and food for all events, EPIC events.
Do they get any pay or stipends, or is it volunteer?
That is the ideal in the future. So it is generally a pretty young program. We've had 5 years of Service Warriors, where we have an annual fundraiser that generally we have a huge service project where 200 plus volunteers come to beautify a BPS school. This past year we were at the Mildred Ave, and we painted. It's led by the youth at Epic, each service project. So we created 50 back-to-school kits for teachers and repainted 19 of their classrooms. So that's one annual. That's if that continues to increase and continues to be successful, then we will eventually, and our partnerships grow and our outreach towards different resources in the Greater Boston community does expand, then we will look into stipends, and we really do believe in that being our ideal. But at this moment, no, we're not at that state. I have some flyers that could be more helpful to you.
Can I ask, are you in touch with any other Boston departments, like Boston Centers for Youth and Families or anything like that?
We partner with MILCB.
Get ready to say hello.
Okay, great. We'll get you hooked up with BCYF. Because that will be the group, the city department that works with youth. And there's some other departments that we can link you up with, because it's only about a week now, right?
Yes,
until
right.
the, deadline?
It is. I was lucky enough to meet with Winston last week, and we were able to put this together. So I thought it's good to.
And I'd just like to add, they were there at our office. I'm the interim ED at MILCB. And the Christmas event that we had was really, really successful. They put out these boxes all around the community and picked up donations of toys for our consumers. And they had a wrapping event, I think the night or two before.
Great.
And we had a really good time we had some food and had our consumers come out and kind of celebrate the holidays. So it was a really enjoyable time. We hope to support that and do it a lot bigger this year.
Yeah, we always really value MILCB's partnership. Generally 2 Fridays a month, we use MILCB space for youth support groups as well.
Great.
Really value.
Yeah, that's great.
We wrapped 273 gifts this past year. So
Excellent.
Awesome.
And how many people are Service Warriors?
We're hoping for an upcoming class of 30. At this moment, right now, we have 16.
Great. So we have some work to do to get the word out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
You did good work this year, though. Thank you.
It's Ethan, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
I'm sure Winston has all your information, so we can get that out on social media as well. And also, I'll be in touch with you, or Winston can be in touch with you later this week.
Wonderful.
To hook you up with some other departments.
That would be great. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Great. Any other questions or comments or from the public? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make that motion.
Second?
Second.
The meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.